Let's say that this protective order is put in place. The president's vowed to keep commenting publicly regardless of the order. If Trump violates this order, could he possibly face even more potential charges? Or what happens next?
I would hope that he wouldn't violate the order. Let me start by saying the relationship between the government's need to protect and hide its evidence and the defendant's right to speak is not one of balance. It's one of bias, a bias in favor of free speech. So Donald Trump's free speech rights cannot be curtailed unless and until the court can overrule every single bias in favor of the natural right to speak freely. Now, to your question, what happens if the court orders him not to discuss a specific document and he shows up at a campaign rally and distributes copies of the document? That would be the most extreme example. It could be anything from a fine to an enhancement of the order, all the way to incarceration. Now, it's almost inconceivable that it would be incarcerated, but the court does have that authority. The court takes the position that the government, as well as the defendant, is entitled to a fair trial. And if the defendant can disseminate evidence before the court has approved it, before the court has decided it's admissible, that may impair the government's right to a fair trial. That's at least the argument that that the court would make in the court's ruling.
Yeah, very interesting. Judge, how do you think this plays out? Because the Trump team is asking to change the venue because they believe they won't get a fair trial in D.C. They also want the judge to recuse herself. You're a former judge. Do you think she will? How common is this?
Well, recusal is very, very rare. I mean, you really need to demonstrate some unique bias or prejudice or interest in the outcome or the appearance of bias, prejudice, or interest in the outcome that the judge has. In federal court, recusal is almost unheard of, so I don't think the judge will recuse herself. An application for recusal is made first to the judge. Once the judge denies it, then you make an application for permission to appeal. And again, that is also very, very rarely granted. In terms of change of venue, that too is rarely granted. I mean, it is more likely that the jurors might be brought in from somewhere else, but the case itself and the judge would sit and the courtroom that would be used would still be in D.C. Okay. The Constitution requires in federal court that the defendant be tried in the judicial district in which the alleged crime allegedly occurred.
Okay,
right.
Makes sense.
We do know possibly a fourth indictment coming from out of Georgia. They might even use the RICO laws there, racketeering. Why would they do that? Is that so that they can bring a federal charge that possibly couldn't be pardoned by the governor there? Or why would they do that? Why would they bring a racketeering charge?
Okay, so they would bring a racketeering charge for two reasons, and one is cultural. I mean, the word racketeering implicates the mob. It doesn't implicate a former president of the United States. So that's the cultural reason for bringing it, to paint Donald Trump with that awful brush, to tarnish him. The legal reason for bringing it is the penalty for RICO is extraordinary. In terms of divesting the defendant of his wealth. It is also easier to prove a RICO count. So RICO, which stands for Racketeer Influence Corrupt Organization, requires the government to show two or more criminal acts committed in order to create an enterprise. In this case, the enterprise would be the conspiracy to negate the election. But the two or more criminal acts don't have to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. They only have to be proven by a preponderance of the evidence. Without getting too deep into the weeds, it is far easier for the government to meet its burden in a RICO case than it is in a regular criminal case. Instead of proving guilt by 99%, you only have to prove guilt by 51%.
Wow.
So those are the two reasons for RICO. Is that indictment going to come? I think it's going to come in the next 10 days.